Ark Survival Evolved has been a staple on my Switch for years, and despite its reputation, I've always found it relaxing and surprisingly rewarding game to play in single player. Watching the sun rise over my base or taming my army of warbears still hasn't lost its charm. The game's journey on the Switch, though, hasn't been an easy one. After a notorious rough launch, Ark was completely rebuilt by Grove Street Games, transforming it into something far more stable and visually appealing. It was such a huge improvement that we covered it on this channel a fair while ago, and to its credit, the Switch 1 version of the game still manages to walk tall amongst some of the best ports on the system. Now that overhaul has laid the foundation for the version we have today, one that now benefits in unexpected ways from Nintendo's new hardware, because Ark has finally come to the Switch too, just not in the way you'd expect. Now before you furiously load up the eShop and try to download the Switch 2 update for Ark Survival Evolved like I did, it's worth understanding how this patch works. It's the exact same game engine running the same version as the Switch 1 edition, but it detects whether you're on a Nintendo Switch 2 and pushes that engine even further. So if you've already got the game installed, you simply just download the update. Grove Street Games quietly dropped this patch with no warning, saying it brings an improved frame rate, higher resolution, and upgrades to the shadow quality and anti-aliasing for the Switch 2. Backwards compatibility still remains intact, so all your save files are still the same, and if you play on the regular Switch, the game still runs on the exact same build. The benefits simply activate when you're playing on a Switch 2. Now with all that out the way, let's dive right into this and see how it works. Now right from the start, the resolution is noticeably sharper. Even up close, the rifle looks crisp and the increased anti-aliasing smooths out the pixelation along the barrel. This improved clarity extends across environments, dinosaurs, and objects, and it makes the world of Ark feel much more refined on the Switch 2. Texture resolution does appear to remain the same, although the level of detail render distance seems to improve in certain areas. So this upgrade really is focused primarily on clarity and frame rate smoothness rather than adding and upgrading new textures, because, like I mentioned before, it just uses that Switch 1 engine. So, as you can see on this side-by-side footage, as we approach the large tree on the beach, the enhanced shadows and lighting on the Switch 2 give the impression of significantly more detailed foliage. Shadows on the ground also looked much more defined and visually impressive. Looking at these parasaurs standing side by side, you can see the difference in shadow quality. The shadows, particularly on the palm fronds, are sharper and better defined, removing the pixelation present on the original Switch. And that overall level of detail in the world just makes it feel more convincing and immersive. Finally, riding a pterodon down the river highlights the environmental improvements, especially on the water detail. The level of detail pop-in is reduced on the Switch 2, and animations like the wings flapping are noticeably smoother thanks to that improved frame rate. These changes make exploration feel more fluid and visually satisfying on the Switch 2. And when it comes to frame rate, let's be real, that's what most of you guys are eager to see. So let's put the game side by side on the Switch 1 and 2 in a variety of situations and count those frames. For the first comparison, as you can see, riding the dire bear at slow speeds only really shows a subtle difference, which is a credit to the original Switch 1 rebuild, because at slower paces the engine really has no trouble keeping up. The Switch 1 holds around that 28 to 27 frames per second, while the Switch 2 sits comfortably between 45 and 50. However, once the dire bear starts sprinting, the frame rate on the Switch drops to around 20 frames a second. The Switch 2, in contrast, stays closer to that 45. Now this improved shadow quality also makes areas like the redwood forest appear far more detailed, and as the movement speed increases on the dire bear, the Switch 1 struggles to load in assets, and that just tanks that frame rate down to around 15 frames a second, and also increases the frame times. The Switch 2 also experiences a dip, but manages to stay above 30 frames per second, and it handles the asset loading smoothly without any noticeable stutter. Finally, in combat in the same area, the Switch 1 just struggled to recover. Animations for the Terror Bird and the rifle reload begin to chug along with the actual frame rate, and it just makes combat feel frustrating and sluggish. Now the Switch 2 once again dips to around 30 frames per second, but maintains fluidity. The animation still remains smooth, resulting in more responsive and survivable combat experiences. And all of these improvements in visuals and performance really directly impact the way that Ark plays on Switch 2. Exploring the world feels smoother, whether you're gliding across the map on your Pterodon or carefully sneaking through a densely forested area. The sharper visuals just make it easier to spot resources, creatures, and potential threats, while the more stable frame rate keeps that movement and combat responsive. Now, combat in particular benefits immensely from this upgrade. Encounters that felt frustrating on the Switch 1 due to choppy animations or sudden frame drops are far more manageable. Like reloading and aiming your rifle, riding a dinosaur, or dodging attacks, it just all feels fluid, and it makes surviving encounters feel far more fair and engaging. Even in demanding areas where the Switch 1 would stutter or drop frames drastically, the Switch 2 handles these situations without compromising gameplay. Now, as you saw, there were some drops in frame rate on the Switch 2, but it always manages to stay above 30. The asset popping is significantly less jarring, shadow and details feel natural, and the world retains a consistent level of detail that just helps maintain that immersion. Ultimately, this patch proves that the same Ark engine, when given the extra horsepower, can offer a noticeably smoother and more polished experience. It should say, for the record, before this patch came out, we did test Ark on Switch 2 and it ran capped at 30 frames a second, and now we can go beyond that. So for players like me who have spent countless hours on the Switch 1, the Switch 2 upgrade makes revisiting familiar landscapes a more enjoyable and visually satisfying experience. The Switch 2 upgrade for Ark Survival Evolved is a remarkable example of what the Switch 2's extra hardware power can do for an existing game, provided they have the right support. Grove Street Games could have easily just left the Switch version as it was, but instead, they've just quietly delivered a massive improvement that sharpens visuals, smooths out the frame rates, and just makes the overall experience so much more enjoyable. While it's not a dedicated Switch 2 port, this game feels noticeably more polished and playable. For anyone who's looking at this video thinking, hey, I might want to dive into Ark now, it's currently on sale for a significant discount on the eShop. I think it's about $12 Australian. So whether you're returning to tame dinosaurs or deciding to venture into the wild for the first time, the Switch 2 brings a compelling reason to jump back into Ark Survival Evolved. Good luck, survivors! Thanks so much for watching my video. If you liked it, the best way you can support What's It Like is by liking, subscribing, and sharing it with your friends. For more reviews, click on the thumbnails to the right, and for everything Nintendo, check out whatsitlike.com.au.